Hey guys, so we went through this presentation earlier in the year, but I just kind of want to give you guys a review since you're writing an argumentative essay currently outside of class. Introductions and conclusions particularly have been things that we have kind of struggled with in this class. Thesis statements can always be tough. For the most part, you guys have been doing a fairly good job on thesis statements, but it also cannot hurt to review a little bit. So I'm not going to try to make this a million hours long or anything because we've done this before. You should at least kind of remember this presentation, but just for review's sake, I think it would be good to, sorry about the bell there, get a little bit of a refresher. So we're going to start off just by talking about introductions and conclusions. What's the point of them? They're basically the first and last impression of your paper. So a lot like in real life, you should always leave a good first and last impression to make your paper stand out. You don't want anything to sound too cluttered or abrupt. So that's why we work on these skills and really like fine tuning your intros and conclusions. So I've said this a lot of times. If you write your intro and conclusion last, it's often a lot easier and faster to introduce a topic you just spent a lot of time on. I usually do write the conclusion like as it comes, but typically I will do a bit of pre-writing first, and that's something I always encourage you guys to do just because it's so much easier to write and write a developed essay when you know what you're going to say. So even just doing a quick outline to be like, this is what I want to talk about. Sorry. This is what I want to talk about in my first paragraph. This is going to be my second paragraph. Here's some evidence. And again, I gave you guys that persuasion map. That should be really helpful with helping you pre-write. Even if you just kind of fill that out, it will be helpful when you sit down to write your essay. So I'll usually just kind of start writing my first body paragraph, second, third, however many I'm doing, and then wrap that up in a conclusion and then go back and write my intro. It just is a lot easier to say what you're going to talk about when you've actually already talked about it. Okay, so the introduction kind of has three parts if it's an effective one. The first thing it should do is get the reader interested and engaged in the general topic with some sort of hook, and we'll look at those hooks in just a minute. It kind of goes from general to more specific and narrows down your topic so that you can introduce a thesis statement without too much of an abrupt jump between the hook and the specifics of your paper, and then give your thesis statement, which is the statement that explains what your paper is going to argue and the main point. So you can kind of notice here on the right side of the page that this little graphic kind of helps you just organize that in your brain. We're going to start out with a broad hook of some sort, a question, a quote, something, and then narrow it down to that specific thesis statement. So we actually looked at this. Hopefully you guys will remember. I think you'll at least remember the second example if you don't remember this one. We're just kind of trying to figure out where the introduction, in the introduction, where the hook ends, where the writer starts to narrow, and what the thesis statement is. So I'm just going to read this quickly. Celebrating the Revolution, French citizens sent King Louis XVI to the guillotine. Every Halloween day in ancient Rome, criminals were executed in the city square. In the 1880s, in an effort to prevent crime in the US, hundreds of bank robbers, horse thieves, and murderers were hanged in front of the public. However, in the last half of the 20th century, the death penalty has faced increasing opposition. Many people, especially members of churches, are against capital punishment, and most advanced countries have eliminated the death penalty. While it's true that the death penalty has some negative points, it is still a powerful and useful tool. Therefore, our society should keep the death penalty to deter crime, to give fairness to victims of their families, and to punish inhumane criminals. Very topical topic, very relevant topic right now, because this is something that's being talked about a lot in our country. But if you notice, it starts out by talking about examples of when criminals are executed throughout history. So that's kind of the hook they start with, which is great. Where do they start to narrow? Well, I see this transitional word here, however. So I'm guessing it's there. In the last half of the 20th century, the death penalty has faced increasing opposition. So kind of introducing what the argument is or what the debate is. And then here in the last sentence, taking a stance on that. And this is actually a really good, this is a good way to like sort of qualify it. While it's true that the death penalty has some negative points, it is still a powerful and useful tool. They're kind of setting up their stance there and allowing for a counter argument, which is really good. And I would expect, if this were a full essay, to at some point see this writer address those negative points. What are those negative points and how are you going to combat them? And then there's the thesis statement there, and it really sets it up well. I can tell what they think we should keep the death penalty and why: to deter crime, number one, to give fairness to victims and their families, number two, and to punish inhumane criminals, number three. And that kind of sets up what their paragraphs are going to look like. Were we right about this? Yes, we were. I was pretty confident. Okay, so ways to get the reader interested with a hook. That's going to be your first part of the introduction. And the intent is to engage the reader, not to start arguing or explaining anything yet. So if you just jump right into your thesis statement right at the beginning, it's very abrupt. There's a better, more sophisticated way to develop that. Be interesting, moving, or informative. All things that Captain Hook is. So just some techniques, some ideas of different hooks. You could use a quotation or a surprising fact. There's some examples for the one on the death penalty. You could ask a question or describe a problem, dilemma, or controversy associated with your paper. I had a student last year, I'm not going to name names, but she always began every essay with a question hook. And there's nothing wrong with that. Not like, you don't have to, if you find something that works for you, then stick with it by all means. But I just kind of gave her a hard time because I was like, I would always know which paper was yours, even if it didn't have your name on it, because of your introductions. You can tell an anecdote or a reason for your interest in the topic. This is a great opportunity to actually be able to use some first person pronouns in an academic essay, because a personal anecdote is a great way to engage your reader. So that's kind of the exception to that rule. Define a word that's central to your topic. This example is pretty good. The term genetically modified means, if you're writing about something that's maybe a little unclear or something that not everybody would know about, that would be a good tactic. Or you could make a historical comparison or contrast, which is what the death penalty introduction did, and it executed that really well. No pun intended. So narrowing down your topic, is asking what's wrong with this introduction. How could we fix it? Just by the fact that it's on the narrowing down your topic slide, you can kind of guess that it has something to do with that. But just reading over this, one Christmas, my father bought a new set of lights for the Christmas tree. He bought them very late on the 23rd of December, so we did not decorate our tree until the 24th of December. However, we all became very sad when we found out that the lights were defective and would not light up. Our family had no time to buy more lights, and as a result, we had a Christmas tree without lights that year. Consumer protection laws are necessary to ensure that buyers have confidence in the goods they purchase, to enforce retail standards, and to provide greater product safety. So, okay, so this thesis, which is the underlined sentence, it's obviously like related to the little story that they told, which, by the way, which of the 5 introduction techniques was used here? Personal anecdote, little story from this person's life. But we're really having, as the readers, we're really having to connect the dots between this anecdote and the thesis, and we shouldn't have to. So they can fix that by narrowing down a bit. And I will go ahead and tell you, this is a pretty long introduction, and I think that we could shorten it somehow. But it's a better introduction being longer, even if it's a little too long. It's a better introduction because it narrows down. You have this personal anecdote, and then, like the majority of consumers in the US, my family had placed a blind trust in the products available for purchase in stores, but this trust is often misguided. A lack of legal protection laws allows for low quality products to be sold by US retailers, and this has a number of other negative effects on the American economy. and then go into the thesis statement. So that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so writing an effective thesis statement, in a lot of ways, that's the most important sentence or two that you're going to write in any paper. And as you guys know, for the AP exam, having a strong thesis statement it counts for one of the 6 points that you can make on an essay. So it's very important. It kind of helps you and the reader stay focused. The point of it, it gives the main idea of the entire essay. It suggests the topic for each body paragraph. Commonly, it has 3 parts that are parallel in structure, like the one about the death penalty we looked at. That's not the only way to write a thesis statement, but it is a tried and true structure. So if you are kind of struggling, especially with thesis statements, sticking to that kind of 3-part structure can really help you out, and I definitely recommend it. It avoids first-person expressions like, I'm going to talk about. Don't tell me you're going to talk about that. Just talk about it. And the supporting points should be logically connected to your thesis or argument. So a good example of this that does have that 3-part structure is, to become a more inviting campus, Gainesville State College should expand its cafeteria, offer student housing, and offer childcare. You've got 3 parts there that set up what your different paragraphs are going to talk about. I'm going to expect to see a paragraph about expanding cafeteria, one about student housing, and one about childcare. So given this thesis statement below, how many paragraphs do you expect in the body of the essay? This is a pretty easy one because they've given you numbers here. But obviously the consumer protection laws, I would expect there to be a paragraph about ensuring that buyers can have confidence in the goods they purchase, a paragraph about enforcing more consistent retail standards, and a paragraph about facilitating greater product safety. A good hint is, don't include your evidence, quotes, or arguments in the thesis statement. Wait and do this in the body of the essay. I remember a kid I had a couple of years ago that if we had just practiced writing thesis statements, she would want to write like a whole paragraph or an incredibly long sentence because she was just trying to cram all the information into a thesis statement. And you don't have to do that. You have a whole essay to do that. So evidence, quotes, things like that, those are probably going to be better as evidence in your body paragraphs. When you're writing your essay, if you've already written an introduction with a thesis statement, go back to your thesis statement to make sure that you're staying focused. Your essay should be about what your thesis statement said it was going to be about. And for 5-paragraph essays, like intro, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion, one supporting point in the thesis statement should be 1 paragraph in body essay. And that's only a general rule. Every essay is different, but like I said, that's kind of tried and true, and it works well and keeps you organized. So we're going to look at these thesis statements and see which one is most effective for the topic, should marijuana be legal in the United States? Since you're not here and I can't ask you in person, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you what's wrong with each of them. So the first one, the use of marijuana should be legal for a number of specific and compelling reasons. Okay, but what are those specific and compelling reasons? It would be better if it says the use of marijuana should be legal because reason 1, reason 2, and reason 3. Number 2, as the Center for Disease Control has shown in its 2003 drug abuse report, marijuana should not be legal because of its relationship to lung cancer rates in the US. 13% of lung cancer cases can be tied to marijuana consumption, and they have cited a source here. While that's great information, that's definitely more at home in a body paragraph. Like for instance, if you've got a body paragraph about how it can contribute to cancer or other health issues, that would be a great thing to include as evidence in that body paragraph. Number 3, marijuana should not be legal because it is too dangerous. Well, you might think it's too dangerous, but overall, this one is really just too broad. We need to know why it's dangerous. Why is it harmful? What are some things that it does? It's good that it establishes this person thinks that marijuana should not be legal, but it's just not specific enough. Number 4 is going to be the winner here. Using marijuana should be against the law because it damages the brain, causes memory loss, and leads to birth defects. Takes a firm stance. It should be against the law. And then tells us why. 3 reasons why. Damages the brain, causes memory loss, leads to birth defects. I would expect to see a paragraph about each of those 3 things. That one's a great example of a thesis statement. And then number 5, this is tough for an English teacher to see. In this essay, I will explain the negative impact marijuana has on health and cognition. I don't want to see that sentence at all because number 1, it's obvious that this person thinks that marijuana is negative, probably thinks it should be illegal, doesn't say it should be illegal. So it's not taking a firm enough stance. It's not taking a specific enough stance. And it's got these dreaded phrases in this essay. I will explain. Don't tell me that you're going to explain it. Just explain it. I can't emphasize enough how elementary this looks. And we are not elementary school students. We are AP students. We should be far beyond this. But it's a thing that a lot of people still struggle with. Lastly, conclusions. There's kind of 2 parts of the conclusion. There are 3 parts in sort of the upside down triangle of introductions. The conclusion is sort of a right side up triangle, but it's only got 2 parts. So they're similar, but sort of opposite to introductions. They don't present new relevant information to your main argument. Instead, they're going to guide the reader away from the essay. Conclusions have 2 components. First of all, a final analysis or interpretation of the paper. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. This looks so terrible. I tried to get a kid to fix this for me one time because it used to say restate, and I don't want you to restate your thesis. I want you to say exactly what you've already said and just regurgitate what you've told your reader earlier in the essay. Find a new way to frame it. Try to see if there's a different way you can kind of, like a different angle you can take, a different way you can come at that thesis, but just reiterate what your main argument is, or sum up the general meaning, explanation, or description, and then have some kind of ending comment, like an interesting idea or your personal interpretation of the paper. What can we take away from it? What larger implications does it have? That kind of thing. So you're going from the narrow specificity that you were writing in the body of your essay and broadening out in your conclusion. So there's a few techniques that you can do to kind of end your essay. You can echo or continue what you did in the intro's hook. Like if you start out with a personal anecdote, you can finish the story or suggest solutions. Like the one with the Christmas lights, maybe at the end, they want to come back and say, make some other kind of connection to that Christmas fiasco that they had. If you use a statistic, you can kind of use the essay's arguments to reinterpret the numbers in a new way, or say, like, if we implement these strategies, then maybe these numbers can go from this to this. If you opened your paper with a quote, you can finish it with one as well. That's hard to do for in-class essays because we just don't have tons of quotes floating around in our heads that we know word for word and who said them. But if you're doing an out-of-class essay, then you can look up quotes and make sure that you're getting them right. And that's a really effective way to open and or close an essay. And the third thing you can do is to make a suggestion or prediction, which I really like that one. Like in a paper discussing reasons for domestic violence, you could offer a few suggestions for overcoming the causes of domestic violence. And that's it. This part doesn't really matter. So we're not going to go over that, but hopefully this is helpful. This is always a good thing to review when you're writing an essay. And also, like I mentioned, looking back at that persuasion map should also be helpful in helping you to organize your essay. So if you're organized, if you go into it kind of knowing what you're going to talk about and already having some kind of organization planned in your head, it's going to be a lot easier to write well and write quickly. And looking back at these sort of suggestions for how to write intros and conclusions and thesis statements should also help you kind of refresh yourself on how to do that effectively. So hope this was helpful.